Okay, let's dive into this wild story. I still can't believe it happened. Imagine this. I was just trying to buy some groceries, minding my own business, and then I got the most bizarre phone call of my life. The electrician, who is supposed to be fixing a minor wiring issue at my house, told me very calmly, someone locked themselves in the bathroom. My bathroom. The one that was supposed to be empty. Was I wrong for immediately thinking the worst? Would you have just walked into that situation blind, or would you have reacted exactly like I did? Tell me, what would you have done? Let me take you back to the beginning, because to truly understand the sheer panic and confusion, you need the full picture. It all started innocently enough. My house, a charming but slightly aging bungalow, had been acting up. Flickering lights, a few outlets that just refused to cooperate, and the occasional smell of something vaguely electrical. I'm not exactly a DIY enthusiast, especially when it comes to potential fire hazards, so I bit the bullet and called in a professional. I found a highly rated local electrician, let's call him Gary, who seemed perfectly competent and trustworthy over the phone. We scheduled a time for him to come over, and I made sure I'd be home to let him in and explain the issues. The day arrived, and Gary, a man in his late 40s with kind eyes and a practical toolkit, showed up right on time. I walked him through the house, pointing out the problem areas. The main issue was in the living room, but I also mentioned a flickering light in the upstairs bathroom, mostly as an afterthought. It was a minor nuisance, not a critical failure. He assured me he'd take a look at everything. I had a few errands to run, including that much-needed grocery trip, so I told Gary that I'd be out for an hour or two. I made sure he knew where everything was, told him to make himself at home, and gave him my number in case anything came up. I even offered him a key, but he declined, saying he'd just lock up when he was done. Seemed perfectly normal. I waved goodbye, hopped in my car and drove off, my mind already on dinner plans. The supermarket, it was bustling, and I was happily ticking items off my list. Milk, bread, that special brand of coffee I love. I was in the produce section, weighing some avocados, when my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but I figured it was Gary, perhaps with a question about the wiring. I answered, a cheerful hello, on my lips. The voice on the other end was indeed Gary's, but his tone was odd. Not panicked, not even particularly worried, just flat, matter of fact, he said, "Hey, it's Gary. I'm almost done here, but there's a slight issue." My heart immediately started doing a little tap dance. Slight issue, with electricity, in my house. Oh no, what's wrong? I asked, my grip tightening on a perfectly ripe avocado. And then he dropped the bomb. Well, I was about to check the upstairs bathroom light, and it seems someone's locked themselves in there. For a moment, I honestly thought he was joking. Like a really weird, dark humor kind of joke. Someone's locked themselves in the bathroom. I repeated, trying to process the words. My house was empty. Or, it was supposed to be empty. I live alone. I hadn't had any guests. I certainly hadn't invited anyone to secretly lock themselves in my upstairs bathroom. Gary, bless his calm demeanor, continued. Yeah, I knocked, and I heard a muffled sound like a groan. I tried the handle, but it's definitely locked from the inside. I thought maybe you had a family member I didn't know about. His voice trailed off, leaving a huge, gaping silence on the line, filled only by the distant hum of the supermarket air conditioning. My mind raced. Was it a squatter? A burglar who had somehow gotten in, maybe through a window I'd forgotten to lock, and then, in a stroke of genius, decided the best place to hide was the only bathroom with a flickering light. It made no sense. Why would they lock themselves **, and who groans in a locked bathroom? My imagination, already quite vivid, started conjuring up all sorts of scenarios, each one more terrifying than the last. Was it an injured burglar, a deranged stranger, Or, even worse, had someone I knew, somehow, against all odds, gotten into my house and was now refusing to come out? The thought sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the refrigerated produce aisle. I told Gary, as calmly as I could manage despite the sudden surge of adrenaline, "No, Gary, no one else is supposed to be in my house, no one at all. Are you absolutely sure?" He confirmed again, positive. "I've been here for a couple of hours, haven't seen anyone else, and this door is locked. I didn't want to force it open without checking with you." I thanked him for his caution and told him I was on my way. I practically threw my groceries into the cart, abandoned it right there in the aisle, and sprinted out of the store, leaving a trail of confused shoppers in my wake. My heart was pounding a rhythm against my ribs that felt like a frantic drum solo. The drive home was a blur of traffic laws ignored and frantic phone calls to a friend, Brenda, who lived nearby. I told her the situation, my voice trembling. "Brenda, there's someone in my bathroom. Gary the electrician just told me." Brenda, always the pragmatist, immediately suggested calling the police. It was a logical thought, but I hesitated. What if it was nothing? What if it was a misunderstanding? What if it was someone I knew, and calling the police would just create an even bigger, more embarrassing mess? Plus, the thought of approaching my own home, knowing there was an unknown person locked inside, filled me with a primal fear. I wanted to assess the situation first. Brenda agreed to meet me at my house just in case. She said she'd bring her husband, who was a big, burly guy, and that made me feel a tiny bit better. As I pulled into my driveway, Gary was standing outside, looking a little uncomfortable. He had packed up his tools and was leaning against his van, clearly waiting for me. "Anything new?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He shook his head. "Nope, still locked, still quiet. It's a solid door, so it's hard to hear much through it." He pointed to the upstairs window of the bathroom. I checked around the house, no signs of forced entry. All windows are locked from the outside. Front and back doors were locked too when I checked. It's really baffling. Brenda and her husband, Mike, arrived moments later. Mike, seeing my distressed face, immediately took charge. "Okay, let's not jump to conclusions. First, let's just try to talk to whoever's in there, see if they respond." We approached the house cautiously. I unlocked the front door, and the three of us stepped inside, Gary following behind. The silence in the house was deafening, amplified by the unsettling knowledge that we weren't alone. We slowly walked up the stairs, each creak of the old wooden steps echoing in the quiet. The bathroom door, a solid oak panel, looked perfectly innocent, but to me, it now radiated an ominous presence. Mike took a deep breath and knocked firmly. "Hello," he called out, his voice strong and clear. "Is anyone in there? We know you're in there. Please come out. We just want to know what's going on." Silence, no groans, no shuffling, nothing. My heart sank. Was it a prank? Was someone messing with me? This was getting weirder by the minute. Mike knocked again, harder this time. "Listen, we're not going to hurt you, but this is a private residence and you need to leave. If you don't respond, we're going to have to call the police." Still nothing. It was like talking to a brick wall, or in this case, a locked bathroom door. Brenda whispered to me, "Okay, this is seriously creepy. What if they're unconscious, or worse?" The worse part hung in the air, a chilling possibility. I was starting to feel a mixture of fear and profound anger. My home, my sanctuary, had been violated in the most inexplicable way. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. Here I was, standing outside my own bathroom, with an electrician, my best friend, and her husband, all utterly bewildered, knowing there was a person, an unknown entity, locked inside. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have called the police immediately, tried to break down the door, just waited them out? I was truly at a loss, and the tension in that hallway was thick enough to cut with a knife. After another 10 minutes of knocking, calling out, and absolutely no response, Mike made the decision. "Okay, that's it. This is beyond normal. I'm calling the police." As he pulled out his phone, a faint, almost imperceptible sound came from inside the bathroom. It was a whimper, a small, sad, almost childlike whimper. We all froze, exchanging wide glances. It wasn't a groan this time, but a distinctly human sound of distress. Mike slowly put his phone away. "Did you hear that?" Brenda whispered. "It sounded like a cry." My mind immediately went to a child. But I don't have children. No one I knew would ever bring a child into my house and then lock them in the bathroom. The situation, instead of getting clearer, had just become infinitely more confusing and, frankly, disturbing. I felt a surge of maternal instinct overriding my fear. If it was a child, they were clearly in distress. We couldn't just stand there and wait for the police. "Okay," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "We need to get this door open. Gary, can you do anything?" Gary, who had been observing all of this with a kind of detached professionalism, stepped forward. "I have my tools. I can try to pick the lock, or if that fails, I can remove the door hinges. It might damage the doorframe, though." I didn't care about the doorframe. "Just get it open," I urged him. Gary got to work. He tried picking the lock first, a delicate process that involved tiny tools and a surprising amount of concentration. We stood in tense silence, listening to the clicks and jiggles of the lock. After a few minutes, he shook his head. "It's a really old, sturdy lock, not giving easily. Hinges, then," Mike said. "Let's just get in there." Gary nodded and pulled out a screwdriver. He carefully started unscrewing the hinges. It was a slow, agonizing process, each turn of the screw amplifying the tension in the air. Finally, with a soft creak, the door hinges came loose. Mike gently pushed the door inwards. What we saw inside was not what any of us expected. Not a burglar, not a child, not a deranged stranger. It was a small, scruffy, very frightened cat. This was not my cat. I don't own a cat. The bathroom itself was a mess. There was a knocked-over trash can, toilet paper unspooled across the floor, and a distinct, musky animal smell. The cat, a tabby with big green eyes, was huddled in the corner behind the toilet, looking absolutely terrified. It let out another small whimper when it saw us. We all just stared, dumbfounded. "A cat!" Brenda finally blurted out, her voice a mix of disbelief and relief. It was a cat the whole time. Gary, ever the pragmatist, was the first to speak. "Well, that explains the groans and the whimper, and the locked door." He pointed to the inside of the door. There was a small, ornate handle that turned the lock. It was low to the ground. It must have jumped up, tried to balance on the handle, and accidentally flipped the lock. Then it got scared and knocked over the trash trying to find a way out, or maybe just from fear. It made a strange kind of sense, the sheer improbability of it all. A cat, somehow, locking itself in my bathroom. Mike let out a huge sigh of relief, followed by a laugh. All that panic, all that dread for a cat. Brenda was already cooing at the little creature. "Oh, you poor thing, you must have been so scared." I, on the other hand, was still reeling. The shock, the fear, the anger, all deflated into utter bewilderment. Whose cat was this? How did it get into my house? The mystery quickly unraveled. After much coaxing, Brenda managed to get the cat to come out from behind the toilet. It was skinny, but not emaciated. It wore a collar, but there was no tag. I remembered that my next door neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, a sweet elderly lady, had recently adopted a stray cat. She was a bit forgetful, and sometimes left her back door ajar for her own outdoor cat. It was entirely possible that this little adventurer had wandered into my yard, found an open window or door which I usually kept locked, but perhaps had forgotten to latch properly that morning in my rush, and then, in its exploration, managed to find its way into the bathroom, and, with an unlucky swipe, locked itself in. The fact that Gary, the electrician, hadn't noticed an open window or door was easily explained. He was focused on electrical issues, not cat-sized entry points. I called Mrs. Henderson, and sure enough, she had been frantically searching for her new rescue cat, Mittens. She was overjoyed to hear Mittens was safe and sound, albeit a little traumatized at my house. She rushed over, and the reunion was tearful and sweet. Mittens, despite her bathroom ordeal, seemed perfectly happy to be back with her owner. We all had a good laugh about the whole ridiculous situation. Gary fixed the bathroom light, reattached the door, and then, after all that drama, finally finished his electrical work. He even got a good story out of it. Looking back, it was probably the most absurd, fear-inducing, and ultimately harmless event of my life. It taught me a strange lesson about assumptions and the human tendency to catastrophize. We all immediately jumped to the worst possible conclusions, when in reality, it was just a curious little furball caught in an unfortunate predicament. It was a story I'll tell for years to come, and one that always gets a good laugh. So, that's the whole chaotic mess. If you were on my side, thinking it was a burglar or something even worse, please like this video, subscribe for more stories like this, because I'm sure I'll have plenty more absurd tales to share. And share your final thoughts on this whole incredibly bizarre incident in the comments section below. What was the strangest thing you've ever found in your house? I'll see you all in the next story.